Massage therapists know better than anyone the healing benefits of bodywork are not just for a lucky few. Rather, massage is for every body. ABMP's Massage is for Everybody Week, celebrated July 19th through 25th, is part of a bigger year-long movement grounded in advocacy, awareness, and inclusion. Join ABMP in celebrating the powerful benefits of massage and the meaningful role you play in your community. Together, we're helping to expand access, support underserved populations, and elevate the profession with compassion and professionalism. Learn more at abmp.com/massage-week. Precision Neuromuscular Therapy has been teaching high-quality seminars for over 20 years across the country. Founded by Doug Nelson, PNMT uses problem-solving skills and precise treatment options to get powerful results for your clients. PNMT seminars focus on honing your assessment and palpation skills to precisely target the source of your client's pain while understanding the why behind the what. Meet us in a hands-on seminar or online in the PNMT portal and let us join you on your learning journey. Learn more at pnmt.org. At Heights Retreats, massage therapists build stable and meaningful careers rooted in wellness and care. A place where therapists are dedicated to delivering exceptional care to the guests, not to filling their schedule. Heights Retreats care deeply about their therapists, our profession, and wellness itself. Grow with Heights as they evolve into a wellness-driven future. Visit heightswellnessretreat.com for more information.
I'm Doug Nelson, and you're listening to the ABMP Podcast, a podcast that speaks to the massage and bodywork community. One of my favorite quotes is, "If the devil's in the details, then God's in the greater context." In this project, I'd like to explore the greater context of learning and understanding in this field to help you grow and flourish as a therapist. Often, results are what is visible, but they're the end product of a much deeper, much richer process. It's a lot like looking at the canopy of a tree, which is awe-inspiring, but the root system of that tree is often twice the size of the canopy. So let's turn our focus to the process, not the product. So this is what's called the productive struggle, or you might also call it desirable difficulties. It's about embracing that process. If you came to observe me while I'm treating a client, any of the components of the treatment that you see could be identified. You could isolate every one of them and kind of catalog it. But what you cannot see is the context behind them, the sort of, substrate, if you will. And I often think about this when a client will come back and remark on their progress, like someone said the other day, "Hey, that stuff you did last time really helped." What I thought, but I was smart enough not to say, was, "You have no idea about the choices that I actually didn't make, which led to the selection of the treatment I ultimately chose to do. What you experienced was a small part of the actual process going through my head." And that's why, and people don't believe me, but I often tease clients that there's no way you're having as much fun as I'm having. Because I really think in some ways the process is much richer for me. And about that process, about that productive struggle, I want to share the essence of 3 conversations I had with my staff over the last 2 weeks, because each one of them represents a different angle, a different principle in this deeper understanding of desirable difficulties, the productive struggle of learning and growing in this field. And the first conversation was about getting there quickly. A couple of days ago, one of my therapists described this process of her work with one of her clients over several sessions. And about the 5th session, the main driver of this client's pain kind of revealed itself. And at that point, there was a substantial turnaround in her progress. Big time change. The client was thrilled. My therapist felt great about the results. And she was relaying that process to me. But at the very end, she said, "And I'm sure you would have gotten there a lot quicker than I did." As I shared with her, I don't know that that's actually true. And if it is true, the only reason it would be true is that in the past, I did exactly what she was doing, struggled my way through problem solving. And by the way, I'm pretty sure back then I didn't have the skill set that she has now. Plus, I didn't have a mentor guiding me through it. So my progress was a lot slower than kind of everybody else's. And that's really the whole point of teaching others, right? And recording this podcast. You shouldn't have to repeat some of the goofy errors that I did. I want you to make your own mistakes and learn from them. But my biggest thing here is that you need to embrace that journey. And in her case, she struggled through the process. She learned along the way. And I could hear in her recounting the treatment process, she had thought deeply about the decisions she made, why she made them, and the information she missed that didn't reveal their full importance until later. That kind of reflective practice, called thinking on action, is crucial to growth and development. When you reflect on what you did, you learn, you grow, and you build a deep database of understanding that will benefit you years into the future. This is in stark contrast to the idea that when a client presents with this, then you do that. Oh my goodness, if it were only that simple. And for more years than you need to know, I looked for magical solutions to really complex issues, to always be disappointed at the results. And those ideas, as you might imagine, are really easy to market. They sound great, but getting real results in the clinic's a whole different animal. And I get it. The temptation to have a clear if that then approach is really alluring. But let me tell you about 3 times in the past this came up in a really interesting way. In all 3 cases, it was a young therapist who also had really good computer skills who said, really, Mr. Nelson, this is all it's an algorithm. So all you have to do is plug in, here are the symptoms, and then the algorithm would spit out, treat this, and you should do this. And my response is, I'm a little busy. I have a full practice, and I'm traveling and teaching, and I don't have the computer skills you do, so I got a better idea. How about you do it? Well, I don't know enough about the background information. It's like, yeah, and here are resources to figure that out. Go for it. And then when you do, I'll help you market it. Okay, great. So months later, all 3 times, I would call them and say, how's the project going? And the answer would be, yeah, I kind of dropped that because I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden my practice just mushroomed. And now I'm just really too busy with clients to fool around with this other project. So sorry about that. Yeah, well, I got a pretty good idea of why their practice mushroomed, because in doing the work to understand all of that background information, their skill set also escalated exponentially, and clients figured that out really fast and spread the word. So the if that then simple thing is a really lovely idea, except when it doesn't work, and which is most of the time. When things don't go as expected in that kind of framework, you just don't have the capacity to pivot, because pivoting requires a deep knowledge of the choices not made earlier, which now become viable pathways. If you didn't struggle through that process, if you didn't make those decisions about what not to do, you only have the answer, the end product. That's not good, because answers are only correct if they're in response to the right question. What if your original idea wasn't the right question at all? Now you're really lost. So in a way, the shortcut version looks like this. Patient presents with shoulder pain. Now apply shoulder protocol, which I did for, again, longer than you need to know. But the reasoning process is a little more like, patient presents with shoulder pain. What is this tissue telling me? And then once you, through all sorts of different ways of gathering information, you intervene, did my intervention change anything? And what does that change or non-change mean? Based on that, what should I do next? There's actually something else worth exploring here, and I think it's really, really important. And that's the difference between something that is complicated and something that's complex. A complicated problem has lots of moving parts, but they're generally kind of knowable and the solution's findable. Like a puzzle, 1,000-piece puzzle is really complicated, but hopefully all the pieces are spread out over the dining room table. So all you have to do is figure out where all the pieces go together. It's really complicated, but it's not complex. A complex problem is when there are variables that you really can't predict, where the same input could produce different outputs depending on context. This is often capsulized in this idea that I just love of the stochastic arts, which refers to probability and randomness, that along the way, things could go in many different directions. It was Einstein who said, infinity isn't a line extending through the heavens, but variations at any point in the line. And so as we work with people, human bodies, especially chronic pain, that is about complexity. It's perfectly understandable, if not tempting, to respond to that kind of complexity with maybe one of two mindsets, like, oh, it's all too complex, kind of be overwhelmed by it. Like there's no reason to even research or explore it because, everybody's so different. You can't apply anything. So you just kind of do what you do. Or kind of the other direction would be, just do fill in the blank because it's really the key to everything. Both of those ideas will end up being a great disappointment both to you and to your clients. In my experience, productive struggle is the only appropriate response to complexity. Protocols are the appropriate response to something that is complicated. But conflating the two, mixing those two up, thinking they're the same thing, I think is one of the deeper problems in massage therapy education. So embrace complexity and learn how to practice with confidence while dealing with uncertainty. Next conversation, doing your own research. Research is sort of a substrate. When I decided to write the Mystery of Pain book, it took me almost 3 years to do the research for that book. And of all the stuff I read, all the stuff I explored, I bet certainly less than 15% of it actually made it into the final book. But here's the thing. The 85% was still in my head as a sort of, again, a substrate, a background knowledge to be drawn upon and context for the insights that were actually shared. And that's really came out when I was interviewed about the book. Instead of repeating just what I wrote, like anybody who read the book could probably do that, the interviews were a chance to dive deeper underneath some of those things and explore them in greater detail and greater context. That's why it's so important to have that underlying database from which the surface is what you see, but you have to do that research yourself to be able to have that reservoir of information to draw on. And that was really exemplified in a conversation I had this week with one of my senior staff. She's mentoring another one of my junior staff, and both of them were with me when I saw a client last week. So the three of us are in the room, and I'm explaining to the client how, things that you see on an MRI and her MRI findings may not necessarily track with the symptoms that she was experiencing. And when that client came back a few days later and saw just the two therapists without me there, that client was substantially better, but still had concerns about those original findings on the MRI. My senior therapist assured her really by repeating almost exactly what I had said in that first session. But the therapist she was mentoring, the kind of junior therapist, had read an article that I had suggested to her, and her understanding of that subject was far deeper, far richer from her own reading and exploring that information. And it's so interesting that the senior therapist said that her mentee, relaying that knowledge to the client, came off as far more authentic. It inspired far greater confidence in the client. And this is coming from the senior therapist. Wow, it's the difference between repeating something that you've heard and having a really deep understanding of the concepts behind it. And it's just so cool that the senior therapist noticed that. And that's why I've adopted the strategy in that mentoring environment. And if you ask my staff, they'll confirm this. I don't necessarily answer their question directly, but I'll just point them where to look for the information. So I don't know, if we're treating the gluteus minimus, I might turn to them and say, okay, this is innervated by what nerve? And if they can't answer it directly, then I just say, okay, go ahead, you look it up and then come back. Because if I tell them, they'll forget. If they struggle and do the work themselves, they'll remember. It's so important to do that. Third conversation from one of my staff. Let me tell you. So the other day, one of my senior staff greeted me by saying, let me tell you everything I understand about facet issues. And then she proceeded to explain to me everything she understood about facet issues until she kind of got to the point where, wait a minute. I don't think I understand this. So it was all good, right? Until it wasn't. But in repeating it to me, in her recounting to me her understanding, she then recognized the areas where her knowledge was incomplete, and then we knew where to fill in the gaps. This is so important because if I had explained to her, if she would have said, hey, can you tell me more about facet issues? She would have smiled and nodded, and I'd think, wow, she's really getting this. And I can see in her face, she's smiling, she's nodding, she's tracking with me the whole way. Really? Maybe not. And I always wonder about that in seminars when I'm speaking and people are smiling and nodding, and I think, do they really get this? Can they apply it in the clinic? And when I'm teaching now, I'll often circle back to something earlier and just have one of the therapists in the audience explain to me or explain to the person next to you this concept or this thing. And in them recounting that, any gaps in understanding or misunderstanding will become really, really clear. And honestly, it's been true for me as well, painfully so, because, many times I might hang out with one of my friends, who's an amazing professor about some subject I know nothing about, but they understand it so well that when they're telling me about some really cool thing, I feel like, wow, I can't believe this. I actually understand this. This is so cool. What I realize later is that says everything about them and nothing about me, because it's really cool. And then when I get home and I'm explaining it to my wife or get with some other friends and hey, let me tell you about this. This is so cool. And then I start to explain it and I can see the faces of the people I'm explaining it to. They start to get a little screwed up and a little what the heck are you talking about? And I hear myself this wasn't as cool as it was before, right? Because I'm just repeating an answer. I don't really fully understand the context that led to that answer. Turns out it's kind of important. It's sort of it's like a really nice plant with a root system that's nothing, because the first gust of wind, somebody questioning me, and the whole thing is gone. Oh my gosh, it triggers a memory of I've been in Japan a couple of times and had enough knowledge of the language to be embarrassing. And in a fit of stupidity once, I was at a Japanese restaurant here in the States. And so I thought in my head, I rehearsed it, and it was yes. So I asked where the bathroom was in very good Japanese, not thinking that if you speak in really good Japanese, they're probably going to answer you in Japanese. What I got was a 3-minute answer with all sorts of other stuff. Nothing, the only 2 words I knew, Hidari and Migi, which are right and left, I got nothing. Let's just say I smiled, nodded, and 15 minutes later, I still had to pee because I didn't know where the bathroom was, and I was too embarrassed to ask for a second time. So, yikes. All right. So what are the takeaway lessons? I think first, what I'm imploring you to do is just embrace that process of learning and discovery. The feeling of uncertainty that you have when you're trying to figure out how to help a client who's struggling with some sort of pain or discomfort, that isn't incompetence. That's the actual work of a skilled clinician. You're not supposed to know the answer. You're just supposed to understand the process of figuring out the answer. And so the second thing is just learning to tolerate that struggle. Often in the past, our educational system rewards people who get to the answer first, right? Who got the right answer first. But in our field, that rush to come to an answer can lead to something called premature closure. meaning you just want to figure out what the answer is as fast as possible. And once you can name it, name which muscle or what whatever it is, the sooner you name it. The problem with naming it is now it blinds you to other explanations. And in my experience, jumping to that too quickly and blinding to other possible explanations will come back to haunt you later. They certainly did for me. And in essence, number 3, clinical reasoning, it isn't like some sort of checklist. It's a living, ever unfolding process of hypothesis generation. Here's what I think is going on. And then you test it. And every assessment finding, every outcome that you do from, your treatment either confirms or challenges your working model of what's happening in that person's body. But it only works if you're holding that question open long enough to let those findings speak, and you are in that mindset of willing to listen, to learn, and to adapt. So I suppose if there is a checklist, maybe it looks like this. Number 1, see as many clients as you can. Just do the work. Get lots of experience. And that, in a way, builds a database. Second, embrace the struggle. Embrace uncertainty. Because if you do that, it's likely that you will then end up at step number 3, which you will arrive at a strategy that actually gets results. So number 4, celebrate and remember that newfound wisdom, because it will be applied somewhere else. But step number 5 is realize that newfound wisdom actually wasn't the whole story, and there are layers of things you didn't consider. And number 6, repeat steps 1 through 5 for the rest of your career. And there you have it. So I hope this invitation into the productive struggle is something that you embrace. And I hope this podcast is helpful in that endeavor. And I hope to see you at the next stop on the learning journey. Thank you so much for listening.
Elevate your bodywork career with Anatomy Train's Structural Integration Certification, ATSI. Discover how to map the pattern and shape the change through inspiring lectures, hands-on body reading, and practical techniques you can use in your practice right away. Join us for ATSI Maine 2026 to 2027, where Tom Myers will personally kick off this transformative professional training. Learn more at anatomytrains.com/ATSI.